welcome back to the First Strike North America Closed Qualifiers presented to you by Nerd Street Gamers. We are one map down in this group stage game between T1 and Complexity. With me are your casters, Simo and Esports Doug. You know, we asked for a close game before the match started, and I don't think it could get any closer than that. Doug, what do you think was the reason and the edge that Complexity had in the end over T1 in overtime?
It was the adjustments, in my opinion. I think Complexity, they just got punished, quite frankly, by making the same mistake over and over and over again. I feel like a Marshawn Lynch quote where he just talks about punching somebody in the face over and over and over again. But that was the difference maker, right? Like, they finally wisened up and they made the adjustments that they needed to stop that gap, to stop that bleeding. And then from there on, they were able to hold fast and take care of T1. I mentioned early on how impressed I was with how well T1 was playing and how they just were methodical in their play and very calculated. Complexity showed a bit of that as well.
Well, and speaking of Complexity, I know we said before the game that we expected a level of synergy from T1 because they have that factor of playing under the same roof, being with your teammates together. Now, you know, they sort of lost to Complexity, and Complexity, like you said, were the ones that were more adaptable. And I think to a degree, that's got to do with, you know, teamwork and synergy as well. I guess I'll throw this to Simo. How impressed were you with the way that Complexity played around this map?
I wasn't. At all. I mean, Complexity, I would love to give them the credit that they played a complex game, but I just think my main criticism was they played a little over-aggressive in certain instances, and it bit them more often than it should have. T1 were very comfortable playing it slow, playing it safe on the defense and on the attack. They were like, yeah, if you want to keep attacking us on the defense, I will sit here, I will hold my crosshair at the perfect angle, and I'm just going to left click when you pop out and say surprise. And that happened, like, I can't even count on my fingers how many times that happened. And for Complexity, if they had just dialed it back, I know that they wanted to try to find some early picks, and I like what they were looking for, you know, 3 stacks towards showers, 3 stacks towards B short, really just a 3 stack at any of the entryways where T1 might have been, and they were looking for success. And unfortunately, it was always T1 that were ready for them. And that would probably be my main criticism for how wild that was for Complexity. It wasn't always going to work out. Now, mind you, that might work out against some of the teams in the open qualifier. That's not going to work out against T1. And if we're going to be going to Ascent next, a defender-sided map, you can't be doing that on the defense. You got to hold fast. You got to hold your sights.
Before we talk about Ascent, I just wanted to highlight one player. I know T1 didn't really come out on top in this map, but I wanted to talk about Skadoodle. You know, how different is the Skadoodle that we are seeing today and in matches like this in comparison to the Skadoodle back in August, you know, in tournaments like the FaZe Invitational where they crashed out of? Doug, what do you think? How big of an impact is he having now on this current roster?
I think a huge impact, and he just feels more comfortable at this play style. I think putting him on a duelist just kind of frees him up to do more of what is just natural for him. I think that's an important piece. I also think, very similar to some of the conversations we had around 100 Thieves, having somebody else who can frag out at a high consistent level in Spider, once again, just allows him more flexibility. It gives him more room to work and to fine-tune his craft. And I think that this T1 version that we're seeing here, a couple of small adjustments, they're terrifying.
What do you think, Simo? Is this a sort of someone that you feel like can be more consistent now going forward?
You know, sorry, could you repeat the question?
In terms of Skadoodle, do you think he now has the consistency going forward, given that that was something that he lacked back in August with the old roster?
Yeah, you know, I think putting him on a duelist gives him a little bit more comfort, but the word that I would have used in that instance is confidence. He does look like a little bit more of a confident player. He's willing to be the one that pushes forward. Back when we used to see him on the Sova and opping, as an op, you're holding a defensive angle. You're the one that's always pulling back, and if you're a Jet, you best believe that you're going to be aggressive. But on the Sova, you don't have that capability. You can't just tailwind to safety. You can't updraft up and over and cloudburst and, you know, all the shenanigans that Jet brings as a tool, as an agent with her toolkit. But now that we're seeing him on a duelist, have a little bit more mobility, have a little bit more space to work with, you're going to see a whole new Skadoodle, somebody who is going to be confident and work alongside Spider, who also had a phenomenal performance, to provide control around the duelist narrative. He's going to paranoia to allow Skadoodle to push forward, or he's going to provide a smoke to deny vision from one angle and allow Skadoodle to play another angle. And you've got this great tandem synergy that Skadoodle, who has never played with Spider in his entire life, we're now seeing two awesome fraggers work together to get the job done. There's no dirty work on T1 because it's the entire team pushing forward as a unit.
Now, of course,
I want to touch on one other thing on that very quickly. Sorry, Insu.
Right.
It was interesting to see how they played around Spider too, right? Like the conversation that we had early on, and even prior to the broadcast, Lex called it out. Put Spider on a freaking fragger, on somebody who can duel out and frag out and have himself a field day. But even with that in mind, they put the operator in his hands more often than not. So yeah, his kit might not necessarily lend itself to lighting up the scoreboard. They're still putting tools in his hands to allow him to do that effectively and to support Skadoodle and really the entire squad. So it was a loss from T1. I know it was a close one, but there are a lot of really good things that we saw from T1 there.
And speaking of good things, this is Ascent is going to be coming up next, and that is T1's map pick. Are we expecting another close game, or is this one of those ones that's going to pretty much easily play into T1's hands, Simo?
I think this should be a victory here from T1. I anticipated if Complexity was going to win the first map, we were going to go the distance to all three. Losing to Envy and in 13-4 fashion does not boast a very comfortable position on Ascent, considering that was the victory that was won by T1 against Envy. It's a whole different ball game. I don't imagine I'll be very shocked if I see a close match between Complexity and T1. It's going to likely boil down to split between these two teams, but if Complexity takes down T1 here on Ascent, that is a huge statement. That's a huge statement for Complexity to 2-0 T1 and especially finish on their map. That is a huge statement for this brand new roster.
I think it would definitely be an upset if we finish this series with a 2-0. Well, Complexity took map 1, but it's definitely not over just yet. Can T1 level this one up? Simo and Doug take us through Ascent.
Here's the thing, too, Simo. You mentioned...
Yeah. I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to talk about it.
No. We won't. I promise. We're going somewhere else. I won't do that to you. Here's the thing about this map, right? Yes, T1 has shown proficiency on the map. 5-0 record. They're really freaking good on Ascent. The thing is, it's Ascent. Right? Like, Simo, how many times have you and I seen a team jump out to a 10-2 lead or something insane like that at halftime, and you can, for the majority of people look at that and go, well, pack it up. This map's done. And then the team that's down rattles off 10 of their own rounds, and all of a sudden we're looking at triple, quadruple overtime again. Like, it just seems to me that is more of a common thing on Ascent. And that's been the case since Ascent has started, right? Since we first got our hands on the map. So, yes, data suggests T1 should be able to take care of this. They should be able to dispose of Complexity, and we should be heading over to map 3. But I have just seen enough insane stuff on this map to know that we can never count out a team, regardless of who it is.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not counting out Complexity. I'm just based on what we've seen in the open qualifier. This is something that we had identified T1 is incredibly comfortable with. And considering how warmed up they are off of Bind, they're not going to be happy about that loss to Complexity. Going to triple overtime and then just getting blasted on the B site. Like, there's nothing happy about that. There's nothing exciting about that. So they're going to be wanting to come back with a vengeance. And T1 is not a team as prestigious as they are that wants to fight through the losers bracket. Right. That's not something that they want to be looking at and looking forward to for the rest. But ladies and gentlemen, without any further ado, enough podcasting from us. The match is ready. Ascent is ready. Our teams are ready. And it's going to be Complexity starting off with the defense. They get side selection, considering T1 got the map pick in this part of the map veto. So at least for Complexity, if we're looking at a potential victory, it starts off with securing as many rounds as humanly possible on their defensive side.
And the thing is, they don't boast the same impressive record on Ascent. They just come in at 2-1, which is still very good, might I add. But they show strength on the defensive side, a 63% win rate. So it's not. I know everything suggests that T1 should be in control here, but Complexity can easily keep this thing spicy, easily make this interesting.
I'd have to agree with you, and especially after what we just recently saw, that would have to be the case for a team like T1, and especially a team like Complexity, who have proven that they can take down giants. They can make them bleed, and we're looking at T1, a very interesting look, pushing up through the middle, having a lot more control of this B site, but Complexity, instead of playing passive, they have membership boots on the ground on the site. So they have all this control, and once again, it's back to the classic T1 standard and patented slow style. They've just slowed things down. They've gained a lot of ground, and they're like, see you later. So I don't know what's going on. You're going to have to tell me.
Well, so they got plenty of information. They created space for themselves across mid, but then they pulled out, presumably thinking that they had made enough noise to know they were going to rotate over. But Sharky had a chance. Sharky is still behind a couple of members. Now the door's going to go down. He's not going to get a chance. He's going to have to relocate. But the action is certainly going to go down on A as AZK begins to plant the spike.
Yeah, planting it not in a default spot, not towards the generator. So anybody playing towards the A main side is really going to suffer in keeping this spike safe. We're now starting to see the push forward. Complexity already down a numerous amount of members, but Sharky and company are going to dwindle those odds down to the 2v3. Still action on the site. Sharky, it's all down to you, buddy, old pal. And we'll see how far he can take this one. Spider behind the generator, dangerously low, down to 9 HP. First shot's going to connect, but Skadoodle flanks all the way around town and brings it back home. T1 start off on a very important round here. The pistol on the attack going their way. T1 can string a couple more rounds together. We're not looking at a very good map here for Complexity on the defensive side of that.
Well, and I think what we saw at a T1 there was a lot. It looks a little bit different, but it's a lot of what we saw from T1 on Bind, right? They establish full control across mid. They make their way all the way essentially to the doorstep of B, and then they're let's not, right? Like let's just not. And they rotate all the way back over, and fortunately, it netted them a win. But Complexity didn't bite super hard, right? Like when we see a rotation of that caliber, it's because the defensive side bites super hard and the attacking side is able to go ahead and rotate over, and the site is essentially theirs for free. But that's not what we saw there. It was chaos.
And once again, T1 playing slow. We've seen this hurt time and time again, but considering it's only round 2, I'd imagine they're just not willing to walk into a couple of shorties. And that's exactly what's on the opposite side. Close range weaponry favoring Complexity. So pushing forward is going to be a little bit of a tougher call. Spider going to leave the wine cellar and join the rest of his team, who have started to work their way up towards the middle. I think we're going to see a lot of this from T1 working up the middle. We'll see if Complexity on the flip side begin and start to read this. Do they have membership towards the middle to stop pushes like this? Because left. It might really be tough to deal with as they're now starting to funnel in towards this B site.
Yeah, and it does not look like T1's going to be rotating out this time, but AGM and Ohio are able to get a kill apiece to slow down the push from T1 as they trade it back out with a kill of their own. Skadoodle, one of the last 2 members from T1, gets a kill, but the spike is still not
10
down.
seconds left.
The fact that Complexity have managed to really poke the bear here, it's all down to Skadoodle. He's going to find one pick, but Sharky with the force up. This is the second round conversion that really should have gone the way of T1. They had all of the correct pieces. They made their way on towards the B site. They really divided Complexity, but Complexity acted accordingly. And somehow, some way, I was kind of paying attention more so to the action on the screen than the map. But they had a player that kind of looped all the way back around, and it all boiled down to Skadoodle, who was all in his lonesome. So the force up definitely pays off, and that's going to really swing things back for Complexity. You don't normally see that second round conversion come through. That is ultimately going to benefit Complexity immensely moving forward.
Get out of my way.
Yeah, a couple of bulldogs, and then just pistols. 4 pistols, excuse me, on the side of T1. Complexity certainly with the gun advantage, and Complexity, again, knowing they have that, looking to play things a bit more aggressively here. The paranoia, excuse me, is going to push them back just a bit, but the spike's still over by A.
All right, T1, what are you thinking? What are you thinking? Think Complexity. It's safe for them to assume that you're not going to be forcing up this round. You want that 4th round gun round after you lost 2nd round conversion. What are you thinking of? Are you going to go towards the middle again? Because this time there's utility. There's an alarm bot. It's going to give away a lot of information. But Complexity, they think it's going to be the A side hit. They've got a lot of membership there. We're now starting to see the rotation come through for Jonah. The alarm bot's going to really confirm everything that he's been thinking. And the shock dart will stop them from coming forward. Maybe try to do some chip damage. They actually come through Catwalk. That's a little surprising. They trade 1 for 1, and it's still down to the 4v4.
Yeah, but Simo, is it surprising? Like, for Complexity to play aggressively, to rotate their way.
Yeah, you're right.
Well, and they were able to get a pick from it, which is the whole point, right? Like, if they're going to play up against mid, fine, we're going to wrap in behind you. Skadoodle getting tagged up. He's got the Blade Storm out. Spider's able to get one. Skadoodle looking to slice and dice. Not even going to get a chance, but that's all right because AZK does. He's also going to pick up a Bulldog. He certainly works for where he's weak, but there's a chance for T1.
Somehow there's a phantom in all of this. I don't know how that slipped in, but Ohai is going to hope to carry that into the next round. Look at the T1 members, though. They're all relatively injured, and now that's Ohai, a great way to avoid some of that action, and he's already on the site. They're able to mow them down to the 1v1, but Daze holds on as T1 will secure that 3rd round. You know, during the pregame, or sorry, the break, we had identified that bind map was just ridiculously scrappy. Well, sorry, one team was very scrappy and the other team was very not scrappy, but then it ended up being scrappy regardless of what the non-scrappy team wanted, which is obviously T1. But once again, we're looking down the same barrel here. Complexity pushing up into T1, and T1's like, oh, okay, I'm going to try to slow that down if I can by not being there. I'm going to just not be there, and I'm just going to be on your site, and I'm going to get that spike planted. Once again, I feel like we're going to see that battle, because guess who's pushing? Guess who's coming? It's Complexity. Again, doesn't matter if it's an eco or if it's a gun round. They're just like, yeah, let's do it.
They continue to push the pace as they try to wrap around like a python, suffocating its prey around T1 as XP3 gets around, but Skadoodle swings and takes care of him. Skadoodle with 3 on the round, and T1 have managed to work their way onto the A site. The door is down. Skadoodle on the opposite side, however, holding down this tree room as Complexity try to work their way into this thing. And Simo, with that kill going down, I don't know that Complexity even push it at this point. I think AGM just sits back.
In fact, I'm just so very interested in the communication between this Complexity roster, because T1, they're trying to play fundamental Valorant, but they're trying to really just slow it down as best as they can, right? They're trying to play fundamental slow Valorant, right? They've got the executes on point, especially on this map, and they've proven that. But for Complexity, they're trying to play it a little bit unpredictable and really catch T1 unaware. Fortunately for T1, they were prepared. For this round, they were able to rotate quickly, but Complexity 3 eco. Wow. Okay, that's unfortunate. That's a little unfortunate. But 3 members push through B main, and then attack for the jugular, attack at the throat for T1. They lose 2 members in that process. That's just. I'd imagine Complexity are going to keep at it, but it's just going to be a random choke point every round. Oh, you guys feel like going A main this time? Yeah, let's do it. Let's just 3 stack. Let's fight for that orb. Let's try to take him down, because that's what was happening on Bind. They would just choose a choke point and push together. But this time it does look like there's a little bit more of a passive setup, at least on the B side to start.
All right. T1 looking to establish some sort of control towards A. Ohai patiently waiting. Can't believe I just said that. With the Sheriff around the entrance to the tree room. The spike is not committed anywhere. And they obviously don't know this, but there's a ton of utility over on B. If they were to go that way, it would certainly not end well. But the spike, of course, as I say that, starting to slowly creep its way away from A.
I think I'm slowly starting to understand. Complexity are willing to trade themselves. They are playing Among Us. Look at that trade. Look at that boom. You kill my friend, I kill your friend. You're playing Among Us. Crewmate lives are way more valuable than imposter lives, and you're just willing to trade at every single turn. Same thing's happening here as they just trade, but Complexity find the upper hand. You trade enough, you find the victory. As all AGM needed to do was sit pretty on that B side, and that's exactly what he did, and that's exactly where T1 are headed. They're going to be greeted with a turret, an alarm bot, a nano swarm, everything in the kitchen sink. And it's going to give enough time for the rest of Complexity to rotate over towards this B side.
The warm, welcoming hands of AGM, and if that's not enough, it's going to be the Hunter's Fury from Jonah. He's not able to get off the last shot as Brax takes him out, but the problem is there are only a couple of seconds left to keep this round down, and AGM holds fast, keeps off Brax, keeps off T1, and give Complexity another round.
And that's crazy. That's just crazy. That was off of some less than desirable weaponry for some of the Complexity members, but I mean, I guess this is how ideally you want to be playing eco rounds. If you stack, you're of course increasing the chances that one of your bullets is going to land onto the person that comes in through the door. But in this case, they really left it up to the trades, and they were willing to do that. And to be fair, you have to be comfortable and confident that you're going to land the shot after the trade, because after the trade happens, or sorry, after your teammate falls, you got to find yourself in a position to peek out, find the angle, find the head or the body or whatever, and connect those shots. And the fact that Complexity are willing to do that time and time again, they're willing to just trade up, you know, just consistently trade until they have the man advantage if they can find it.
Spider just looking for a lurk from Complexity, and reasonably so, given their play style. Nothing biting quite yet, but there are two members of Complexity that were just on the precipice of pushing out. And of course, as that happens, the Lear goes out from Reyna, they push forward, nobody's home, Spider had already rotated away, and no information was gathered. However, Ohai, we saw his willingness to rotate all the way through A long, back towards the middle of the map. That's still something that we have to keep an eye on as the round continues.
Complexity playing slow, and to be fair, if there's a map to play slow on the defense and not push your luck, it's going to be Ascent. Like, the fact that the defense have such a strong ability to retake, and they're super comfortable in that regard. Skadoodle lands every shot but the one that he needs to. That's going to be XP3 that takes him down, but Ohai on the site will stop them coming on to the A site. The weaponry, of course, less than ideal. Sheriff's in hand. The AZK trying to take out one member on the opposite side, but it should be business as usual as Complexity near on in. And it's tied up 3-3, 6 rounds in, moving to the 7th. Complexity with a lot of ultimates on the table. It should be around. They're going to be looking to commit those to finally extend a lead of the round.
Yeah, and it looks like they're going to have plenty of guns to work with as well. XP3, the one exception, but when you've got friends in high places like AGM and Ohai with plenty of money to work with, certainly somebody's going to lend you a few bucks, and that's exactly what happened. Good guy Ohai taking care of XP3. On the other side, T1. Wait, did Skadoodle really not?
He's ulting.
Skadoodle had 4,500 credits.
He's ulting. He's going to Blade Storm this round.
Yeah, but okay.
Yeah, I know that that's less than ideal, but he may be wanting an op, or he may be wanting to upgrade some of the weaponry from below. And that's ultimately what you want. You ultimately would want to use that Blade Storm on an eco to do some serious damage, but he's willing to sacrifice that and make sure that those knives land. Now to the 4v4, an engagement towards the B site goes sour for both ends, and now it's T1 looking towards the A site. We've been looking at this A site hit pretty consistently from T1. If they're going to go B, it's never through B main, it's always through the middle. And so the same applies for this A site. Very rarely through the tree room, more consistently through A main. Now that the smokes are going down, Ohai smells that the jig is up, and we'll see how Sharky reacts as he's playing towards the tree room.
Ohai has been smoked off up in heaven, as is the rest of Complexity, as Skadoodle manages to get onto the site, and the spike goes down. Keep an eye on AGM on your mini-map, folks. The Killjoy rotating around. It looks like they're expecting it. As Daze sniffs it out. He is able to get that kill, and the threat is gone, but the threat from the knives out of T1. Rip XP3 apart. We talked about the Blade Storm early on, and it has paid off. Why do you need a gun when you've got that?
Yeah, bringing a knife to a gunfight, that's definitely the plan there for Skadoodle, but unfortunately he's going to pay the price with his life. The spike is planted towards the generator side, so they need to start to get involved. Sharky going to play contact. It's now the red carpet's going to be rolled out, but no one's going to walk it. It's all down to Ohai. Shots won't even ring from the Vandal in his hands. It's AZK on the opposite side that'll send him down to the graveyard. T1 back into their convincing lead, but I don't imagine it's going to be very convincing for much longer because these teams are going tit for tat.
And you know what we saw there? It was some fancy footwork that kept him out of that rolling thunder. So he had a chance, but it just wasn't enough. Not able to pull it off. And as you mentioned, that's going to give T1 the lead. They're going to have plenty of guns to work with. There's Ohai, who's going to have that operator on the other side. We talked about Skadoodle potentially choosing to play that way, maybe because he wanted an op the next round. Looks like he's going to be bringing in a rifle this time as T1 leaves the spike back towards A and try to establish some semblance of control up mid. And well, it's worked in the past, right? Like the scariest thing that's been between them and mid-map control is this alarm bot.
Well, at least it's the one thing that'll say, hey, someone's here. It's an alarm bot for a reason. It provides an alarm when someone's in the vicinity. And so for Complexity, they know that the middle of the map has been compromised. They have to hold on to their respective assignments. 3 members towards the A site, 2 towards the B site. While T1, once again, this B site hit. It's all relies on this mid push. They've got a lot of presence here. Complexity not interested in being a part of that conversation. Will stay really distant from the middle there. Smoke's going down to stop any push from B main. Now, once again, T1 playing the time game once again.
So Spider is sitting across the middle of the map to make sure there's nobody rotating over from Tree, but he's been spotted out, and the Reyna's going to try to go aggressive. Meanwhile, the rest of T1 are going to flood their way onto the B site. You see the darts have been used, the flashes as well, and the Blade Storm has followed suit. As Jonah gets a kill, 11 seconds left on this thing, and Complexity rips T1 to shreds. There's just one member left, and it's Day. Still has the spike, not going to have enough time to get the spike down, or enough bullets even to take care of Ohai. T1 drops that round.
So for T1, I want to have a look at how that round unfolded for them. We had Days that pushed in onto the site, and I think he may have been joined by another member as they were pushing in from the bottom side, the entryway, the ledgeway. And the rest of the team were like, yeah, okay, we'll blindly follow the leader. You know, okay, Days is leading us to salvation. The Complexity, as you know, they're not just going to sit in a smoke. The amount of times that if I had $1 for every time Complexity sat in a smoke, I'd have $0 in my savings account because they don't wait. They don't wait. They just go in. They just pop off, and that's exactly what happened. They didn't even let them near the site. The only person that made it on was Days because he started the push. The rest of the team was like, okay, we'll follow you, but Complexity peek out. They get there in time and they get involved, and so does Skadoodle, but unfortunately it does not pan out. That's the spike down. That's Jonah and AGM in tandem, leaving the fruit market as a wasteland for T1 members, down to 3 remaining for them as they back away to safety.
And the problem is the spike is behind enemy lines. There's really no way they can easily get onto that thing as they get picked apart. T1 just down to Dazed. We were just talking about this, but he doesn't have the spike. They know exactly where he is. A flawless round from Complexity, a statement round at that.
To be fair, looking at this half, it hasn't exactly been very convincing from Complexity. Yeah, some of these rounds have definitely really been going back and forth, but once we get to the defense, that is where ultimately I see, you know, T1 really start to feel pretty confident about their map. In the statistics that we have across the 5 maps that they play, they boast a 55% defensive win rate whenever they're on the defense in terms of rounds total. And on the attack, it's 44%. So they're definitely hurting as it pertains to their attacking half in comparison to the defensive half. But Complexity, as we already know, you, myself, and chat, is that this team is full of surprises. So I still can't quite chalk it up to just, oh yeah, T1 have a better defensive win. I still think Complexity have got something in the tank. It just really is a matter of what when we move on to that second half.
Here.
Folks, it looks like once again we're in the midst of a break. We'll get you back into things as soon as we can. In the meantime, a slight lead, but a lead nonetheless for Complexity. They're going to be bringing an operator into this next round as well. Meanwhile, T1 going to have pebbles, stones to work with relative to what they're going to be going up against. T1 has dropped the last 2 rounds. Things continue to build. The momentum continues to mount for Complexity here on this map, and we talked earlier on about how snowbally this map can be. You give a team an inch, and they're certainly going to take the mile, Simo.
Here.
Except for this half, it really the fact that it's been so back and forth, nobody can build any real momentum because the consistent reset of the loss bonus goes to 1900, and that hurts quite a bit. Which means that you're constantly starved for credit, and we're seeing T1 in that exact position. They trade a good paranoia from the garden side, but guess what? Complexity aren't just going to sit and wait for you to come in. They're going to take the issue to you. They'll find another pick there in the courtyard. It's down to the 4v3. Brax may have been looking for an upgrade, but unfortunately the body that he's looking to find a weapon on is behind enemy lines.
Furthermore, you see members of T1 spread apart all over the place. Brax was kind of pinched in and manages to get a kill with the Sheriff trying to rotate his way over. Going to get another chance. That's a third on the round for him. Give it to him. He's going to pick up the Vandal as well. Going to use the ult, and all of a sudden, what looked dire is in favor of T1. They're going to have the personnel advantage. I don't know if they all have guns. No. Daze only has the Sheriff. Didn't know if they'd picked up anything along the way. And I also don't know if Daze saw Sharky.
He does. Oh, but he still smells that something might be up. Oh, just barely gets some spiders there with the cross. Beautifully played. Now it's just down to high. Daze will fall. Spiders from behind. Still might be able to take him, but the paranoia is going to make it a little bit more difficult to do that. Spike's ticking down to 43 HP. Has all of the utility possible. Starts the attempt with the tailwind in, but Spider is ready. That is not a round you anticipate going to the favor of Complexity. They had 3 chess pieces ready and waiting on that B site, but Brax found 3 1v1s. That is not something you want to leave it up.
No, Brax was the magician there. Brax with the Sheriff was able to get the kills that he needed to open up the map. And again, he was isolated. T1 was spread out all over the place. It was like trying to play connect the dots, but it was a really bad board of connect the dots. There was nobody really within the vicinity of one another to give each other help, and Brax just really put the team on his back there and got the kills that he needed to get them to round. We'll see how things kick off here for Complexity as they're opting to use the Hunter's Fury early on. Not going to tag up anybody or really get any information.
To be fair, that is still information to say, okay, maybe that nobody is towards that A main side, and so the stack towards the B main is a little bit more warranted. We're now seeing Ohai start to cook things up. Shot with the op, 1 through the door and 2 through the smoke. Down to 2 members remaining. T1 has the turret. Gonna find a frag there onto Daze. Good turret there. I don't really know where that was placed or where it was set up, but it's gonna find Daze nonetheless. In CS it's embarrassing. There's an embarrassing story of Summit 1G dying to a Molotov. I think his own Molotov. Dying to a turret is, I think, going to be the embarrassing thing for Valorant. Daze might be feeling that one. But the 2v4, they push onto the site. Spike's ticking. This is looking like a pretty good round for Complexity. They'll spray. Get the defuse and find round number 6.
So Complexity once again take the lead. And it was, as you mentioned, really a comfortable round win for Complexity. It seems like when they win big. They're able to walk out of there with numbers. Things look great. But T1 have just, they've hung in there, right? This entire time, as soon as it looks like Complexity is going to rattle off and like build a big lead, they win 2. They're looking for the 3rd round. Bam, T1 refuses to give things up here. And given how this has gone, the pull and the tug between both of these squads for his half, for them to go into half at 6-6, I feel like is a win for T1.
It's definitely a win for T1. And we'll see how, of course, the attacking side for Complexity does pan out. When Envy beat Complexity on Ascent, it was the attacking rounds that at least Complexity were able to have a little bit more success in the defense. It still wasn't nothing to really scoff at, but already looking at this round, might be looking like a 7-5 finish. Spider, trade. Now the retake is upon us here for Complexity.
Yeah, the ultimate was used from the Killjoy as well. Sharky tries to stay alive and hold this corner. AZK is able to get in on the action, as is Brax. As both teams are losing members, it's going to drop down to a 2v2. The Blade Storm is in effect for Ohai, unfortunately, with 30 health and not much else to work with. But the spike has not gone down. It's sitting harmlessly on the corner of the A site, and T1 can't really get to it.
Yeah, they're going to throw smoke after smoke and start to inch their way forward. As Complexity will rotate around through the tree room. I don't believe there's a door that can be closed. And Brax is now going to be waiting on the opposite side. That's going to be looking
30 seconds
trade
left.
with XP3, but he's going to find the frag instead. That's Spider, and that's spiked down. 20 seconds left on the clock. As now Brax is looking to get involved. But smooth moves from XP3. I'm not sure what he was doing on the tail end there, but now he's got to bring the fight over to Brax. He's waiting with the op. That's going to be the peak. That's the swing. Brax ready, looking down the sights. Shot's going to be clean. And like you said, 6-6. It was looking like 7-5 for a moment in favor of Complexity, but T1, they hold on. They get that spike planted, and they win the round.
Well, and Simo, that round was like the perfect encapsulation of the entire half, right? Like, Complexity looks like they're in the lead. Complexity looks like they're going to be able to rob the round away. Complexity looks like they're in control. And T1 refusing to go away. This time we are going to get a replay from our friends over at GoPuff. The first half was just, as I mentioned, a push and a pull from both sides, as neither team really able to establish any semblance of a lead.
Some good plays from Ohai there. Back and forth, it just felt like, yeah, I think the tug of war here between these two teams, ultimately, there was no clear winner. But now this is a half where there has to be a clear winner. This is where Complexity can 2-0 T1 and make a statement piece. Or T1 bring us to that third map, and already Complexity off to a hot start, find the fight in the middle. As T1 now just down to Dazed, he's going to be taken down from the push towards from B main. And now it's just down to two final players playing towards the defender spawn. Spike likely going to be planted. And now it's just up to T1 to see if they want to fight this. They really have not a huge choice. And they'll start by finding a pick on AGM.
Yeah, but how much more can they get? We also saw, like, aggression to the 10th degree there from Complexity. I'll explain in a moment, as this round is still yet to be decided. T1 down in personnel, but they're certainly not out of the round quite yet. Complexity starting now to pull back to more conservative post-plant positions as Spider tries to run forward with the Ghost, but it's actually Brax who's able to get one. Sharky trades it back out, and Complexity seal away the pistol round. Simo, Complexity work their way, they brute force their way up the middle of the map. They flood their way onto the B site, and then this was the kicker. Instead of just sitting back and playing conservative post-plant positions like you would expect, you remember, oh crap, never mind, it's Complexity we're talking about. They start to rotate up into the spawn, into the defending spawn, and take the fight to T1 again. Complexity just plays with a pace that really T1 can't match, or they haven't been able to match up until this point.
Well, to be fair, there's some semblance of matching, as it just feels like even after Bind, we never left overtime because they just keep going back and forth. We're still in this never-ending, eternal overtime between Complexity and T1. Feels like we're going to go 1,000 rounds here of just nonstop back and forth. But I ultimately think that once we get to that third round, T1 are really going to start to cook up. We'll see if that, of course, happens. Complexity win the pistol, good for them. They're on the precipice here of winning the second round conversion, but still need an early pick or, you know, a multi-kill of some sorts, especially with this push now towards the A side. They get a little bit more involved. There's the player that TP's behind. We're now looking at some of the action that is happening before us. It's frag after frag, trade for trade, now down to the 3v3. Unfortunately, they get stuck in the doorway and now maybe looking towards the B site, maybe still interested in this A site. But Complexity down 3, don't want to lose any more members than they need to.
No, I don't know that T1's fully convinced that this is where the spike is going. Daze is still on the opposite side of the map, has not fully committed. AGM has been spotted out, and the spike is still not down. Complexity, now they're going to work their way onto the A site. Brax has been spotted, and Jonah's going to plant the spike. Finally, can T1 fight it back?
Skadoodle gonna find one in the rotation. AGM in the tree room. Now it's just down to 2. Sharky alongside Jonah. If there's any 2 players I'd want in this position, it'd probably be Jonah. You know, a stand-in and Sharky as well. Phenomenal performers. Oh, that's a great angle as well. 2 kills for Jonah. Down to 1 final player. It's Brax. Unfortunately, can't win that one. Frenzy too strong. Now it's just down to Sharky, who holds fast, but an expensive round for Complexity. That's what I was saying. Yeah, despite the round win, this is where it's really going to start to hurt. Everyone down to pistols. Likely going to force up if they can. Just want to win this 3rd round if they can. Try their best, not wait for that 4th round conversion because they don't really have weapons that they can convert on. So this is going to be an expensive one. If T1 win this one, it's going to be really just down to pennies for Complexity.
We'll see how T1 decides to play this early on. We saw earlier in the half, they left dazed over on B, and then they really had everything over onto the A site. This time, a bit of a different look, as they have invested 3 members towards the B middle area of the map. They have some authority as they've created some space and they've worked their way up through Tree Room, establishing some semblance of control there, at least enough to know that that's not where the play's going to be. But of course, as I say that, Sharky goes aggressive. He's able to get one. Brax gets a filthy 2. Keep the pushing back.
Yeah, it's a little bit of an unfortunate animation there for Sharky. He likely would have been able to find the pick there onto Brax, but dazed, surprising us completely with that spray with the Odin, finds the pick in rotation. Now it's down to the 2v3. Alarm bot and all the good stuff is going to be used here by AGM, but the spike still is going to go down. We'll see now how Complexity deal with it. So far, they've been dealing with it quite well, down to the 2v2, and it's T1 in the retake.
Here the spike continuing to tick as second by second passes, and T1 fall further and further away from the possibility of taking this round. The dart's going to be used to try to establish some semblance of control. Nothing's being pinged, but it's actually the bullets from Skadoodle out of heaven who are going to tip things in their favor, but XP3 is able to take care of Daze. It's going to drop down to a 1v1. XP3 swings, and the 3-piece gets him the round.
Okay, so now things have changed, Doug. Now I'm no longer the sleeping bear hibernating in the winter. I was thinking this was going to be a T1 business as usual, chalk it up, but now I've been energized. Shock dart to my own dome as I wake up. T1 losing that gun round is so big. It's so big. This is the half that they were supposed to really cook things up, really turn things up. The defense favors for them, and the defense favors for almost every instance here on Ascent. But to lose the gun round, you put Complexity in a very scary position to not only close out the map, but we remember Complexity won the first one.
Get out of my way.
And that means Complexity could very well win this one, and that would be a huge statement piece. But the Blade Storm to start off, Sharky gets domed from distance. Sorry, gets taken out from distance at the lower part of the catwalk there, and T1 start with the man advantage on their eco.
And remember, folks, this isn't just a matter of halves here for T1. They're 5-0 on this map, leading into this match up against Complexity. So they've shown that they can do it, right? They can do it on attack, they can do it on defense, they can do it upside down, backwards, whatever it is, they're able to pull it off. Now they find themselves facing severe adversity. They're down 3 rounds. They're down 1 map here in this series. Complexity slowing the pace down, giving T1 something different to think about here as they work their way up mid.
Well, 2 members on the site, and one of those, of course, is Skadoodle. You don't want to be there on the opposite side. Skadoodle is a problem. See if he's able to find success on one more. Cannot. That's going to open up the B site completely. The question becomes, can they hold on to it? It's the eco for T1. They have the man advantage, and they could brute force their way in, but we know T1 is not really comfortable with doing that. I don't really know what he just
Placing swamp
okay, he ulted from the spike to the back corner of the site. That's 6 or 7 all points gone now, and now we'll see how T1 decide to push in. We'll question that ultimate later. Smoke, of course, is down. That's an engagement for AGM. Wins that. Can't win the second as the clip runs dry and has to transfer the spray. Cannot do that. Spike's ticking. Injured members from T1. They know that they're packed tonight, but they're playing close. Shots not going to be good at all as T1 close out the eco.
Wait.
Very close one at that. Complexity can't hold on to the site, but there's, you know, honestly, like, just take it away. Like, I have no idea what happened that round.
It was mind games at the end of the day, right? Like that ultimate, oh crap, is he coming in behind us? What that does is that buys time and that creates, again, a little bit more space, right? If you're having to pull some of your resources away from the site to see where that ult is coming from, is it back in the defending spawn? Is it over across mid? When the spike is down in that situation, every second is precious. And again, unfortunately, things going in favor of T1. They're able to get the defuse. They got the kills that they needed. And that leaves Complexity in pretty dire situation financially.
Well,
whoa,
that's
no, are you
clip
kidding
it,
me?
ship it, send it to Reddit, put it on the front page. That is once again yet another statement piece from Complexity. Skadoodle was dunking round after round, and that is the Blade Store from Ojai that sends us to another dimension. But it's the 4v4, and T1 once again are facing down this retake.
You hear the ult has been used out of AGM to try to once again create space, give Complexity a bit of room to breathe on the B side as the spike is down. T1 waiting patiently on the fringe. You know, as soon as that goes down, they're going to have to take the matter to him. Brax is able to get one. His XP3 on the sideline for the rest of the round. Ojai on the other side of the smoke with the blade, trying to get a kill, but no, it's Brax and AZK who rip Complexity apart. T1 are not going to get the spike.
Clutch.
Oh,
they don't get it.
Wow. 1 second off. Wow. They delayed for as long as they could. The lockdown was definitely a problem. We'll have a look at that replay, see how Ojai made Skadoodle feel what he's been feeling for the entirety of this map. Look at that. Skadoodle's like, wait a second. Have you ever seen that GIF where someone is opping towards A heaven? They're looking up towards A heaven on ascent, and a brimstone just pops out of nowhere into the frame of the scope.
It terrifies
That's
him.
exactly what happened. He's just looking. He's like, okay, I got this. I'm looking in. And then out of nowhere, you just see a giant ponytail right in the reticle of the scope. So that's Skadoodle's going to be thinking twice about that one, as Complexity on yet another gun round are going to be looking to secure round number 11.
I think the important thing is you just started an argument in Twitch chat about how that word is pronounced. GIF versus GIF. There is a right answer, folks, and it is GIF, but I'll let you guys figure that out amongst yourselves. Complexity looking to get onto the A site. You hear the Empress has been used, as is the Hunter's Fury as well. Ojai goes in and gets punished by Brax. They have numbers advantage. Sharky in the corner, just waiting patiently. The problem is the spike is out in the middle of the site with no cover to be had. Sharky gets punished once again. Brax has already got 3 on the round, but he finally goes down as Complexity fight to stay alive.
And Brax and Skadoodle have been such important pieces of this T1 recipe. I'm glad that they have managed to keep those players and keep them competitive. Now it's just down to 2, but the spray! Jonas trying to hide! He's trying to crouch down. Now he's going to reposition past the reloading clip. Oh my goodness, Dazed! He gets involved. Now it's down to the 1v1. 30 seconds left on the clock, and the spike is in the worst spot ever.
And he doesn't have any bullets in his Phantom.
Wait, what?
He has no bullets in his Phantom. That's why he has the classic out.
Oh no, that's so unfortunate. He's going to be looking to try to pick one up. That's going to be Daze. He's trying to play Ring Around the Rosie. Shot's going to be good. Clutch from Daze. Definitely went down to the wire. But this entire series has been down to the wire. And I just want to point out that I think that's the first Empress we've seen of the entire match. Like I think I'm pretty accurate. I could be wrong, but it feels like it.
No, I don't remember another one either. You may be right. And again, it didn't really capitalize on anything, right? Like Brax in Tree Room was able to hold down that angle. He took care of Ojai, and then he took care of Sharky as well. You mentioned how important Brax has been to this roster. He's been the cornerstone of this thing. On Cypher,
that he had. Well, speaking of the cornerstone, Skadoodle not on the corner anymore as he backs away, and once again it's the battle of the Jets. Skadoodle's gonna find a pick onto Jonah. They get up close and personal, really just trying to bring the fight to Skadoodle if they can, but unfortunately it really causes the ruckus in the defender's spawn. Now Ojai gets up and vertical, And just as he goes up, he must fall down as well. Now it's just down to AGM. Remember, this is looking like, based on what we see here with AGM, not really the best of weaponry in the hands of AGM. Looking to try to at least find one more pick on the way out, but they dogpile onto Skadoodle, and he takes down 2 with him before he ends up falling. Complexity now back on the gun round.
And again, Simo, Complexity early on in this half built a lead, right? And you looked at it and you think, all right, this might be it for T1. Complexity has won 3 rounds in a row. They're severely hurting, or Complexity has won 3 rounds in a row. They've severely hurt T1's economy. Can they dig themselves out of this hole on the map that they prefer? And they do it, right? Like, they do it in insane fashion. And then they're able to put together a couple more. This is why T1 is so good on this map. You never count really any team out. But again, a team that's 5-0 on Ascent.
I feel like we're going to another overtime. I'm just like, I would love for T1 to show me the money and give me some convincing rounds. And they have. Please, they have. Complexity have pushed in and have lost their entire team at the hands of Brax or Skadoodle. Pick one, flip a coin. They're going to kill 3 of your teammates. But I still think it's going to be overtime because Complexity have proven that they were willing to fight. And so far, that fight hasn't really worked out this round. Spider going to take down 1. Recon Bolt likely going to try to spot some of those members out. But Spider will, of course, as he finds a pick, he's also found as well. Down to the 4v4, T1 on the retake.
Yeah, and AGM is trying to pinch his way into the tree. They know where a couple of members are. You hear the Rolling Thunder has been used to try to establish some room for them to work with onto the A side, and T1 continue to ruin Complexity, but there's actually a little bit of friendly fire. Skadoodle's taken out. That's been counting down to a 2v2, 1 member left on the side of T1, and it's Dazed. Dazed with the Odin. Taps, looking for the 1v1,
Wow.
and AGM gets the best of them, a 3K to give Complexity the round.
That's such an important round for Complexity. It's going to reset the loss bonus once again. And T1, they're not doing too bad, but you lose another. You're at match point, you're at series point, and your opponent has the weapon advantage. The fact that it's been back and forth for the past 5 rounds really is an ode to the economy as well. This is it. This round really is going to determine a whole lot for both teams. If Complexity lose this one, T1 are going to likely catch up and tie us up 11-11. And if Complexity win this one, T1 are going to fall to dire straits, lack of weaponry, and ultimately put Complexity in a position to close out the map in the series.
Man, this matchup has been so good between these two teams. We talked earlier on off broadcast about what to expect between Complexity and T1, and do they have any history of playing against each other? Recent history, at least, and no, they didn't. So we really went into this with all theoretical ideas on who could best who and where they have the advantage and who you give the nod to, and the thing has delivered, folks. Map 1 goes into 5,000 overtimes. Map 2, T1's map, they find themselves down 2 rounds. Complexity on the precipice of 2-0ing T1. This thing has been a banger from beginning to end.
I think from outside looking in, you know, the outside perception of these two teams, this would be considered an upset. But Complexity have been building up to this moment for a long time.
30 seconds
Trying to find
left.
the right pieces. Their original roster didn't work out as they had intended. They really want to be considered a tier 1 team, top 10 team. And it starts with beating T1 right here, right now. TP back to site, does not commit. Actually does commit in 5 days! Oh my goodness, they're being torn apart! It's down to 3. If Skadoodle falls here, he does not. He escapes. He finds Ojai down to the 3v3. What a disaster of a start of a round. T1 now have to retake.
There's utility from AGM to ensure that nobody's going to be coming in from B main. But it looks like members of T1 are going to be flooding in from Market and from the defending spawn. You hear the footsteps. They know they're there. Sharky's going to swing. He has spotted one, but he's going to get tagged up down to 23 health and not a ton else to work with. AGM gets in on the action as is XP3. T1 down to 1 member left, and it's Spider, the new addition to the roster, trying to avoid match point, trying to take care of Complexity, but the problem is he's weak as well. Doesn't have the time. It looks like he's just going to run for the fences. And ladies and gentlemen, Complexity are at match point.
And series point, Doug. And series point. And so now, T1 off of
Match
one
point.
Vandal, and I'm assuming they're going to force up here. If they save, there's no point in saving. You're facing match point. You're facing series point. You're on the defense. You've got no choice but to try to make things as spicy as possible. Judge for Brax, Bulldog for AZK. Spider's going to hold on to that Vandal. Likely maybe responsible for some of the purchases for some of the other players, maybe buying up. But Skadoodle with the Blade Storm here, we've seen it be an impact before, but if Complexity can hold on here and close things out, what a statement it would be.
Oh, the aggression, the Blade Storm, you called it, Simo, right? Bright as day. Skadoodle's able to get one, and they're playing so aggressively here. They have nothing to lose except the entire series, but they're trying to keep the push, the pace up high as they continue to push towards Complexity. 2 members have already been taken out from T1. They're down to 2 members left. The spike is starting to rotate over to A. Simo, this does not look good for T1.
Were Complexity looking in a mirror for a second there? Because like they were looking at themselves. That's the first time I've ever seen T1 play aggressively. Now, mind you, I thought if this was going to be a 2-0 series, it was going to be in the hands of T1. You know, they win bind, and then they go to their map. You know, they're happy, they're proud, they're excited. I did not anticipate a Complexity 2-0 victory. What a statement piece from this roster, taking down such a competitive team in T1, a Titan, and they prove they can bleed. And boy, have they. Losing bind, triple overtime, and now losing Ascent, their map pick, the map that they're comfortable on, the most comfortable on in the open qualifier. They fall short, and Complexity will move on to face the winner of potentially, I don't know, it's going into like quadruple overtime over there as well, but Genji could be the one that moves on as they are up a map in that series.
Look, prior to this series starting, we were having conversations, like, you know, what's this group going to look like? We all, Yinsu, you and I came to the conclusion unanimously that this is really a fight for second place, right? Like, how good are these two teams? How well do they match up? Who's going to make their way out of the group? Complexity with Jonah P and Sharky, again, trial members. Man, they showed up, and man, they showed up in convincing fashion. Like, you mentioned it. I don't really know how else to express it other than that was a statement win from Complexity.
Yeah, I think we got to bring Yinsu back in here. She might be just like willing to attack this thing. Let's bring Yinsu back in here. She's probably got a lot to say, and I'm excited to hear her thoughts on such an interesting matchup. A 2-0 victory from Complexity. How you like? That's just I don't even know what to say. I don't know. I'm done. That's it. I'm done.
Well, thanks, guys. I know in the break, the 3 of us were talking about, you know, a potential upset and whether if Complexity would 2-0 T1, we'd consider that an upset, and I think we definitely would. Simo, you weren't that convinced by Complexity on Bind. You weren't that impressed by them. Are you impressed by them now?
Yeah, I mean, I think that T1 played the retake in that second half quite well. They managed to find several opportunities to just leave Complexity dumbfounded. But I think in that same dumbfoundedness, they also found that they were also dumbfounded by the way Complexity was playing, just constantly being given the runaround. And in those post-plant scenarios, Spike is down. Yeah, T1 managed to have the number a couple of times. Complexity definitely proved a lot of people wrong. I thought if they were going to win a map, it was going to be on Bind and it was going to go the distance. I just did not expect such a weak Ascent from T1. I don't know if it was the weak Ascent or if it was the strong Complexity. I don't really quite know which one it was, but still, it has to feel really bad being a T1 fan or being even a T1 staff to say, this is the map that we have pushed through the open qualifier with. We defeated everyone in our path on Ascent, and here we just lost to Complexity, which was also, we were taken out by Envy, and they were also taken out by Envy. But now here we are losing our map to a team that hasn't broken into that upper echelon of the top 10 discussion.
Well, I mean, speaking of the fact it's their map, and I know you two briefly touched on this subject of maybe some teams saving their strat and saving what they have for the closed qualifiers. And T1 being a team that's played a lot on Ascend, it does sort of open them up and expose them a little bit to anti-stratting. Doug, do you think that is the reason why Complexity took them down, or were T1 just a bit lackluster?
Yeah, it's a really great question, Yunsu. It's tough to say. I think we saw two prevailing trends across both maps. T1 likes to play slow. Complexity likes to get in your face, right? And that was it, right? Those are the themes we saw from both teams, and it very well could have been Complexity did a ton of, like a fecal matter ton of homework on this squad and analyzing the film and how their set pieces are, or it could have also just been Complexity likes to play at one speed, and that speed is go, and that ultimately was what did it for them.
Well, what does this mean now for T1, guys? You know, they will have another chance, and there's also a world where Complexity might lose the next game and they will drop down into that lower bracket, which means they might meet T1 again for a rematch. Is this a time where they should be worried right now, Simo, do you think?
Yes. Equinox, this is a scary group. I thought initially that this was going to be a fight for second, and it does look like Gen.G are going to that third map, so we might be waiting a little bit before that next matchup. But if Equinox is your opponent and Gen.G do move forward, Gen.G, I think, are going to be very comfortable with taking that first seed. If there's a world where Gen.G do not make it out of this group, that is a very, very interesting sight on the competitive scene for NA Valorant, because this is a top 10 team. They've been in the top 10 since the top 10s were created, okay? Gen.G are going to have a spot. It just makes sense, okay? On the flip side, the fact that T1 have now fallen down to the lower bracket, they've got to fight through two opponents to prove that that was a mistake, that a 2-0 was a mistake. You know how difficult that is? You got to play two best of threes to climb out, to claw your way through. And yes, I know that these players have veteran experience, but I think there might be some sort of element that this new roster just isn't gelling to the maximum potential yet. I'd imagine that they brought in these two players for a specific reason, and that reason is that they want to win championships. We'll just have to see if they just need a little bit more time, because, of course, like you said earlier, there is still that UMG open qualifier that is available for the teams that don't make it through.
I mean, yeah, I think we're expecting Gen.G to make it through, but I don't think we expect them to drop a map either against Equinox. So, you know, in the scenario that they're the ones that drop down to a lower bracket, do you see T1 as a team that can maybe make an upset of their own, defeat Gen.G and progress?
Doug, it's all you, baby. It's all you. Listen, I took the last one. I took the last one. It's now your turn. Good luck with that one.
I've said this from day one. You mentioned, Simo, that Gen.G has been in the top 10 since the beginning of the top 10. I personally have put Gen.G in my top 5 on a couple of different ESPN shows and a couple of different conversations, and I think the reason for that is Gen.G is one of the most fundamentally sound squads to play the game, right? And then they add another Fragger and Sean, and like Gen.G seem unstoppable. Obviously, we haven't had the privilege of watching the Equinox match, but I think if Gen.G continue to falter against Equinox and they drop down to the loser bracket, I think T1 is going to have their hands full. And I want to be really careful about how that comes off, because T1 impressed me with how they played this series against Complexity. And again, you can say, oh, T1 is favored and Complexity is an upset, but we hadn't seen these two teams play. And the truth is, but all these professional teams, the vast majority of them were off for almost not off. They weren't competing to the public live for almost a month, right? So we really didn't know what we were getting into. What we did know was these two teams it's going to be a good matchup. And Brax impressed me time and time again. So while I do think if Gen.G were to drop down, T1 would have their hands full. T1's the real deal, man. Like we've talked about how maybe they haven't lived up to their namesake throughout the history of Valorant. They're on the cusp of being something really special here.
Well, you know, every team is going to have that sort of time period, or maybe having an off day. You never know. But the thing is, they will have to play again today against the loser of Econos and Genji. We are going to take a break now, but if you are interested in that match, make sure you head over to twitch.tv/NerdStreetGamers to watch the last match between those two, because like I said, whoever loses is going to have to take on T1 shortly after this break.